Speak, O Lord, for your servant is listening. Today's first reading from the book of the prophet Samuel is one of my favorites. The Lord calling Samuel as a boy, not even a teenager yet, right around your age, to be his prophet. And the Lord had to call Samuel 3 times before his guardian Eli the priest realizes what's happening. And that's the first thing that strikes me about this passage. The patience that the Lord has with us. God doesn't stop calling because Samuel doesn't answer him right away. God is persistent with his call, and he's patient until Samuel understands who it is that's calling him. I do not dare be critical of Samuel for not understanding what is happening to him right away, because the Lord had to call me a heck of a lot more than 3 times before I responded. I remember in seminary, when we were on a day of reflection, the retreat master was saying, "When did you first feel the Lord gently tap you on the shoulder?" And I thought to myself, I didn't. He broke a 2x4 over my head. Looking back on my life, I could see the Lord calling me to the priesthood from childhood, but I wasn't ready to hear it. In my early childhood, I embraced the idea. Then I ignored it in my teenage years and dismissed it altogether in my college years. And finally, as I was preparing to finish graduate school, all opportunity suddenly closed to me. And a car accident I had back in 1991 had laid me up for 6 months and forced me to be quiet, to pray, and to listen to the Lord. And when I heard my calling to the priesthood again, you know what my reaction was? What? Now? Now that I'm finally finishing my master's degree, you want me to start all over again with 5 more years of school? Where were you 6 years ago? I could just see the Lord going, oh. It wasn't that the Lord wasn't calling. I wasn't listening. So far be it from me to be critical of young Samuel. It only took him 3 tries. So the Lord is patient with us while we figure things out. And I don't know about you, but I find that a very comforting thought. The second thing that strikes me is that as soon as Samuel is called, each time he runs to his mentor, his guardian, Eli the priest. What makes Samuel able to finally respond to his call is that he takes it to the authority of the church. Samuel assumes that it's Eli calling him each time, even after Eli tells Samuel that he's not the one doing the calling. Samuel seeks direction. And because he takes his call to Eli, it's Eli who's able to discern who's actually calling Samuel and how he should respond to him. And please take note, Eli does not attempt to interpret the call for Samuel. No good spiritual director would do that. A spiritual director's role is to point out possibilities and help the seeker to open himself up to God's call. I can remember being very frustrated in seminary and asking my spiritual director, the Franciscan Capuchin priest, Father Dan Mindley, "Do you think I'm being called to be a priest?" And Father Mindley refused to answer me. He said to me, "Mike, I see things in you that are of a priestly quality, but as to whether you're being called or not, I can't say. That's between you and the Lord." That was a very wise answer. Just as Eli doesn't say to Samuel, "Oh, it must be the Lord calling you." Rather, he says to Samuel, "If it happens again, say this, speak, for your servant is listening." He doesn't give Samuel the answer, but Eli empowers Samuel to find the answer for himself. And finally, the last thing that strikes me is where Samuel is each time he hears the call. Samuel is sleeping in the presence of the ark of the covenant. Samuel is physically in a place where God was powerfully present. You know, many people complain that God doesn't communicate with them. And I ask them, do you pray? Well, no. Do you go to church? No. Then many people will say things to me like, well, I don't go to church because I feel closer to God by the ocean or in the woods than I do in church. Wonderful. Fantastic. I'm glad you feel a connection with God through the beauty of His creation. Is God present by the ocean? Yes. Is God present in the woods? Yes. God is present everywhere. God is present in the restrooms of the Showcase Cinema, for that matter. God is everywhere. But God is only present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, in the tabernacle on consecrated ground. So to hear the Lord, we have to put ourselves first in the presence of the Lord.